What's going on, everybody? Today we have Dario Hunter back, and he is going to be addressing the allegations of potential coordinated corruption that may have enabled North Carolina's Green Party to leave him completely off the ballot and putting him at a disadvantage in the Green Party presidential primary. Let's talk about it. One second, Dario. So everybody here is familiar by now with Dario Hunter. Today he's here to describe or respond to the potential allegations from the Green Party elite coordinating with the Howie Hawkins campaign to keep Dario Hunter off the ballot. So Dario, first of all, I want to say thank you for being here. How are you doing?
I'm great. How are you, Niko?
I'm doing fantastic. All things considered, I'm alive. I have my health, and apparently for a black man in 2020, those are two things you cannot count on. So I'm counting my blessings. So just really quick, man, can you just kind of give a response? I'm sure you saw some of the interview that we did with the United Left, where their officials had a conversation with a Green Party official, and they basically admitted that you were kept off the ballot on purpose in North Carolina. So what do you think about that? Is it possible that the rumors could be true? And did that hurt you overall in the Green Party primary?
Well, as to this issue of North Carolina, we have to unpack this a little bit more. People need to know that as it happens, different states deal with their primary process differently. For good or for bad, that's the way that it's been taking place. And what North Carolina chose to do was to put in place a set of criteria for candidates to be put on the ballot that was higher than the national requirements in the extreme. In some parts, you had to have 5 times the fundraising requirement than you would need to have to be nationally recognized by the party. And the national recognition process is a different thing altogether. In order to get the nomination, you must meet certain criteria in order to be a nationally recognized candidate for the National Green Party. And it was very clear at the time that North Carolina dropped those details, that there was only one candidate in mind that had the ability to meet those criteria at that time. It seemed as if the criteria were pretty much tailored towards that one candidate. So North Carolina had every reason to know that. Anyone else looking at the requirements had every reason to know that. And so it was very clear that the state party was engineering an outcome where only one person would be on the ballot. That was clear to everyone involved. It had to be clear on the face of the facts. And so ultimately, this idea that you're going to have a primary, I say primary air quotes, with only one person on the ballot is just completely odious. It's disgusting. It flies in the face of green values and any sense of democratic values. But that's what North Carolina steered itself towards. And the people chiefly behind it, leading the North Carolina party, were self-avowed supporters of the Hawkins campaign. They're on the website. Their picture's up there. They're on board with the Hawkins team. So these are
on the
people
actual party? On the parties?
Yes.
What? Wow.
Yeah, the person that our campaign manager dealt with in this process towards potential recognition by the North Carolina party and placement on the ballot, Tony Ndege, he was on the website as a supporter. He's still on the website. His picture is there. So he's reviewing who gets on the ballot, and you go to the Hawkins campaign website and his face and his name is there. Just basic standards of ethics not being followed. Okay, so the people at the top in North Carolina were all Hawkins supporters. Okay, it created such a divisive situation, this effort to keep everyone else off the ballot, that pretty much locals turned their nose up, and people who were members, sometimes long-time members of the Green Party, just said, no, I can't be a part of this anymore in North Carolina. So it became divisive within North Carolina, and they are still coming to terms with that. Some of these members, some of these locals deciding, what do we do about this? How do we take our party back?
I'm starting to see a pattern for me here. Why is it that everywhere that is connected to Howie in some way, form, or fashion in a significant way has internal battles, like significant internal battles within their state parties? Like in Colorado, where Andrea was a Green Party chairperson, and then somehow whenever the parties united to combat her, they ended up dissolving. The local party ended up dissolving, and somehow Andrea came out on top as a campaign manager and still is the co-chair, obviously, of the Colorado State Party. It seems to be a pattern forming here, wouldn't you say?
Pattern is not quite the word that I would use. I think it's better to describe it as perhaps cartel, cabal, any number of synonyms in that regard. And its effect has been intensely divisive and purposefully so. You know, as an African-American man, I'm very familiar with the ways in which the system sets out to divide people, especially when it comes to people of color opposing deeply entrenched institutional interests, the interest of the establishment. And so what we have here amongst a party that's intended to be a leftist party, leftists being most sensitive to the issues that are going to overturn the apple cart in terms of capitalist abuse in this country, you have what seems like a cabal to divide and potentially conquer. Conquer towards what aim? You know, that remains to be seen, but it certainly isn't towards the aim of improving the leftist agenda, the green movement, achieving our objectives, because what you have is, as a result of it, in North Carolina and across this country, you have people being divided, you have people turning their back on the Green Party, people saying, I cannot be a part of this. Towards what end? Towards what aim? Because this is not an aim or an end that a presidential campaign typically has. You want to bring people in. You want to bring people underneath a big umbrella. What is going on here with the Hawkins campaign and the people behind it? Just dividing Greens all across this country. There's an aim here that isn't within the scope of a presidential campaign, in my opinion.
So, man, this is troubling because we also had, and this is all basically within a couple of weeks, but we cover it on one show. There's another not allegation. I know for a fact it's a fact because I saw all the information. I saw the screenshots. Andrea doxed a presidential candidate, and this isn't information that's just like, you know, criminal record that you can get in 5 minutes by going to a court website. No. This was mortgage, debt, past, you know, marriages, it goes deeper than that. And stuff that you could either spend a lot of money on getting or use somebody's social security to get. And you gotta wonder, and I would like to know your opinion on this. Like, I understand there's such thing as opposition research, but since when is someone's mortgage payments a qualification or lack thereof a qualification or disqualification for whether or not they should be a candidate to be taken seriously? Because given the fact that we just had this massive crisis, a lot of people are in debt, that suppression, that fiscal suppression and oppression that they've been dealing with is what has driven them into politics. You know, so I'm interested to hear your opinion about this doxing situation that's coming once again from one of the top two people in the Howie Hawkins campaign.
My opinion is that they're not a leftist campaign with those kind of tactics. These are the tactics that you see coming from the corporate duopoly, really monopoly parties that have banded together to support, defend, and kill for capitalism. And what they do is they engage in character and personal assassinations. When they can't get to you, engage in actual assassinations all across the globe, which is what they do as well. And
that's
this
true.
Is a part of
Just can I clarify too, because I want people to understand this doxing was in response to someone politely educating Andrea and saying, hey, or excuse me, actually they were trying to contact Howie, but Andrea responded. They were saying, hey, some of this rhetoric from Andrea is vitriolic and it's not really conducive to a successful campaign, especially if you're trying to get 5%. They were being actually respectful and nice about this, trying to help save the campaign. And this is obviously because Andrea is doxing someone who, you know, he's a little bit eccentric, but he's also been kind of unapologetic about talking about a lot of the corruption coming from within that campaign. And they haven't really responded with any policy differences. This is the response, the doxing. So just want to let people know if they hadn't seen the past video. But go ahead.
Because in my opinion, it's not about campaigning. It's about toxicity that seems to have a purpose largely beyond campaigning in a green or a leftist context. Now, maybe you might see this better placed in the context of a Democrat candidate's campaign, and I've seen this. I've seen this in Youngstown, Ohio, where politics get down and dirty, but it serves no real purpose in the Green Party, especially when you're running around saying you want to unite the left, but all people are seeing is division, seeing infighting in the party over the things that you and your campaign are doing. And so once again, what is the larger aim to this? Because it doesn't seem to be aiding in any way, shape, or form, improving the Green Party, moving the party forward, bringing people on board. It is turning people away. And I have to point out something personally. You discussed an instance in which that campaign's allegedly engaged in doxing, digging up people's personal information.
Oh no, that's not alleged. That's not alleged. That's actually a fact. That's something I've seen and will be presenting soon. So don't worry, you could say
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and, it's the lawyer in me.
I understand, but it's like a whole picture of Andrea saying, "Look at what I found." So it's kind of hard.
And the thing about the way that they do things too is that they're really just, they really put themselves out there in ways that I guess they think look great to them, but they're clueless. I think anyone else from a leftist perspective is looking at it and just saying, this is disgusting, this is despicable. I had someone come to me, and I'm not going to divulge that person's name because they're afraid of reprisals, but they made it very clear to me that the Hawkins campaign was engaging in similar tactics against my campaign, against me personally, that they had been in touch with a operative in the Democratic Party, someone who I had been fighting in my time in Youngstown, someone who actually sued David Beatrice, who was the chair of the Mahoning County Democratic Party. That was the person I was told that the Hawkins campaign had gotten in touch with. And so just think about this, based on that allegation, them getting in league directly with Democrats in order to fight with, to oppose, to tear down the character of fellow Greens. They're not about togetherness. They never have been. It's been that same energy from the beginning. And once again, towards what aim? Towards what end? Because it isn't making the party stronger going into 2020.
Man, okay, so you're also obviously a candidate who has your own ideas and your own policies. I interviewed Kevin Zeese with alongside Pasta Jardula from the Combo Couch, and Kevin had some choice words. Now, Kevin is a campaign manager on the Howie Hawkins campaign, has sat on several committees as well. And although he is known as a foreign policy buff and a foreign policy activist, it is bizarre, in all honesty, to see him stand behind Howie to the degree that he has. Now, the reason I say it's bizarre is because, well, we've talked offline and on camera about your foreign policy stances. And so I want to kind of give you a chance to address some of the things that Kevin said, just like I extended, although Howie has not taken that offer, to come on and address some of the things that others have said about it. So he said that you're not good on Israel and Palestine like Howie has always been. He says that Howie has never been a Russiagator. I know it's funny, but that's what he says, and that people like yourself are merely trying to use divisive tactics and are quote unquote, and I hate to say this, but he said quote unquote trash. He said those candidates are trash and they shouldn't be taken seriously. And I even asked specifically regarding you, and he said the reason that he doesn't like you really has nothing to do with policy. And then he also said that, well, you're really a Democrat, you're just a Democrat, and that we should be, so we shouldn't, Green Party people shouldn't like you like they like Howie. So how would you respond to those criticisms?
Well, as to me, really being a Democrat, they should ask their boy David Beatrice in Mahoning County Democratic Party, who they got in league with to try to get personal trash on me that they couldn't find because it doesn't exist. They should ask him about how I sued him and fought their local Democratic Party tooth and nail. So much for that. But then again, they know all about that. They've been digging through everything from the beginning of this campaign, and clearly they got nothing, because the best they're trying to put forward is that supposedly I have a dicey position on Israel-Palestine, although it is public knowledge and has been in the press in the United States and all the way to Israel and back that I fought for Palestinian rights and lost my job because of it. I'm still blacklisted for my position as a rabbi because I had a very clear stance in support of BDS and against U.S. aid for Israel, considering their abuses of the Palestinians. But they know all this, and they're afraid of that fact and what it says about my campaign. And so they're fighting it with misinformation. To be very clear, that hasn't always been my personal perspective. And I've had a very interesting journey and path as a human being, as a Jew, as a rabbi. But I happen to be at this point one of the few rabbis people can name who are out there talking in favor of BDS and supporting it and being that voice out there to let people know what the reality of the situation is. I did live in Israel Palestine for a few years, and I got to see that firsthand, which definitely has colored my perspective. The mistreatment I've seen Palestinians receive firsthand, and the mistreatment that I've received simply as a person of color there, has definitely colored my
Oh
experience. And
yeah,
so
I
my
bet that
background,
rabbi thing didn't work out that well there. They don't ask you if you're a rabbi before they check if you're black or Palestinian first.
well, generally is presumed often by police there that I was Palestinian. So I got at least a fraction of that experience, at least until they check my background and my IDs. But that's definitely
Your
been
background.
an educational experience for me. Oh yeah, when they look at your ID in Israel, there's a way that they can tell whether you're Jewish or not. And so
I know they had markers. They had markers, right?
Well, they used to have it clearly marked on your ID, your air quotes nationality, as they would phrase it.
Yeah.
They took that part off by the time that I had an ID there, but there's a way they can tell still from the data on the ID whether you are Jewish or not. And so that would usually end the transaction. They would take a look at me, they would think one thing or another, and so that combined with the instance of having someone basically barge into my home, police barging into my home, thinking the same thing, I got at least a fraction of that experience. And so that's been educational for me. But even if it hadn't been the case, I think on the balance of the facts, it's very clear that there's massive human rights abuses taking place against the Palestinians. And the fact that I've been vocal about that I've paid a very personal price for that. Beyond not having a job as a rabbi, I don't really have a congregation to call home since that decision, because there's an overwhelming opinion in this country amongst Jewish congregations in support of the state of Israel, its actions. And that's unfortunate. But to talk about,
go ahead.
I just want to talk about the larger issues of what Kevin Z put out there. First of all, that's really just a distraction, that particular issue. We've addressed the issue of their claims about the Democratic Party, which, as we mentioned, they should know better about. Russiagate. So you're talking about another candidate whose position is clear, and a candidate whose position he has been very honest about in regards to the issue of Israel-Palestine, while your candidate has dithered, has lied, has gone back and forth, continues to, in effect, support pieces and components vocally of the Russiagate hoax, while saying he doesn't and that he never has. So what did we hear on the Primo Nutmeg interview? He talked about the Mueller report. He talked about collusion and how Trump needs to be impeached because of it. And then 5 minutes later, politically speaking, he was on Ron Placone saying, oh, he didn't really mean that. He was tired. He was hungry.
What was weird is like how much detail he went into, like, while being tired. I'm like, bro, you talk a lot for somebody who's tired. Because he's like, yeah, not only do I not believe in, or do I believe in Russiagate, but I told Jill Stein that she shouldn't have ever went to a climate conference just because it was hosted by RT. And then he goes on to talk about how many legitimate journalists are on RT. But he's like, but that doesn't matter. I'm like, bro, that's some real in-depth thoughts that you're articulating for somebody who is supposedly tired.
He's knocking Jill Stein. He's pretty much providing support through his perspectives for all the things that Tulsi Gabbard was put through. He's basically participating in the bludgeoning of the left through the perspectives that he's espoused, and he hasn't completely given them up in subsequent interviews. He's just attempted to explain them away or flat out lie about them. He claimed that his statement about Trump had to do with the emoluments clause, but then he said he needed to be impeached because of the collusion. That's in effect what he said in the Primo Nutmeg. So here's what it really boils down to. You, Kevin Z, so whoever is promoting this busted campaign, you are attempting to push aside the lies of your candidate while you are lying about other candidates. You have no shame. Your candidate has ish in his trousers, and you're trying to talk junk about other candidates and say that they're trash. Your perspective on Russiagate is trash. Your perspective on Syria is trash. You're promoting, supporting, and defending the bludgeoning of candidates like Jill Stein, candidates like Tulsi Gabbard. You are not a leftist campaign. And above and beyond that, whatever your positions were, people could take them for what they are. But the biggest problem, really politically, is that you cannot be trusted. You are a liar. Your campaign is a lying ass campaign. How can anybody vote for you when you can't be honest, even if you change your position? Just tell people, you know what? I misspoke. I made a misstatement. I shouldn't have said that. That's not really the perspective of my campaign. It's still problematic, but at least people can say, you know what?
Or
At
say,
least that wasn't a lie. That was a change,
yeah, at
and
least
they
say
can
you
assess
evolved.
it accordingly.
And
Whatever. Don't
I
flat out
gave him
lie
a
to
chance
people.
to ask if he evolved. By the way, I asked Kevin Zeese directly. I'm like, okay, well maybe you're a foreign policy guy. You joined the campaign a little bit after, so maybe you helped him evolve on those issues. No. Howie Hawkins has always believed these things. He never has said any of those things. Primo Nutmeg is a rotten Tulsi Gabbard supporter. This is what he said on the interview. I'm like, I don't understand why any of these things have, like, what Primo eventually becoming a Tulsi supporter, because at the time that Howie did that interview, he hadn't really backed anybody. He had interviewed Jill, Howie, Noam Chomsky, a bunch of people. So I gave him a chance to say he evolved, just like I actually, we discussed your evolution on Israel and Palestine the last time we talked, and he refused to admit at least that he evolved, which makes me think at the very bare minimum, based off of patterns that I've seen in the past politically, he's being disingenuous in his evolution. There is actually no evolution.
And by the way, talking about evolution, the issue of Israel-Palestine, we're talking about them dredging up stuff older than a decade or more. And so we're talking about the difference between my perspectives as a college student and as a much more grown man. And that's how petty they are, because they want to do that with other candidates, but their candidate 5 minutes ago said some trash about Russiagate, and they want to pretend it didn't happen. And here's what I have to break down for you and all the people watching your show. What you're witnessing is a campaign's gaslighting of an entire party and an attempt to gaslight the entire left. Gaslighters, this is what they do. They will say one thing, and then 5 minutes later, when you call them on it, they will attempt to completely destabilize your reality by claiming I never said that. I never said that. That never happened. And they leave you questioning what is or isn't true. These are tactics you see from the Democratic Party, tactics you see from the Republican Party, and this is what the Hawkins campaign is attempting to do. Pretend that things never happened in that regard. But it's all on tape. We all saw it. We all heard it. Your position on that issue is trash. Either say you evolved or just stop. Stop the madness.
Man, so, okay. There was also a comment made by a Green Party official that the Howie wing, if you will, of the party is actually not trying to get 5%. And as everybody at this point should know, Howie's wing basically runs the party. So effectively they're saying the Green Party at large is not trying to get that 5%, which everybody knows would be a massive victory. Now, I know the person who told me is reliable, but of course we should always exercise skepticism when making those types of comments. But here's the thing. Like 2 days later, the Rhode Island Green Party just said they're not putting any Green Party candidate on the ballot in the general election. So now the picture begins to become a little bit more clear, and you got to really start to wonder, oh, okay, so I guess this is true, which is super weird that happened, like I want to say within the same day. But what do you think about that allegation that there's a potentiality for the Green Party at large, although they have a lot of great candidates like yourself, like Chris Hedges just announced in New Jersey, right?
Yeah, he dropped back out. Yeah, he's not doing it. He announced that not too long afterwards.
Is it because of the party at large?
Well, I can't speak to what his overall motivations were, but what he announced was a conflict between his show and engaging in that race.
That makes sense, because it's hard to do your show and objectively, and then because you get money from your show, and then so it could be a little bit okay, cool. But either way, the Rhode Island party literally said they're not even trying to win. They're not going to run anybody. It's impossible. It's like there's nobody going to be representing Rhode Island, and yet once again we're in a race that is Joe Biden versus Donald Trump, an alleged racist. A literal segregationist and alleged rapist versus a racist and alleged rapist, and yet here we are giving both of them easy victories. What do you think about those allegations giving all that?
Well, let's start with Rhode Island. I 100% disavow that position. I think it's not just problematic, it's reprehensible to just leave people without a choice, and just tell them, in effect, you're going to promote in a backdoor way Joe Biden. Because what you're saying when you say that, we don't want to allow Trump to win. We can unpack the whole spoiler argument in more detail from here, but just on a basic surface level, what you are saying then is you don't want to get in this race and promote a presidential candidate for the Green Party because you want people to support Biden?
That's what effectively actually what they said.
Yeah.
They said it. The most important thing is beating Donald Trump.
Yeah, they've pretty much endorsed Joe Biden with that logic. That's really what they did. And that's pretty disgusting. And it really speaks to a larger issue that some people have raised about, the infiltration of the party in the context of the larger dysfunction that exists in this party. You got Rhode Island, in effect, endorsing Joe Biden. You have North Carolina rigging its primary so that only one candidate gets on the ballot. And that campaign, there are allegations, as you raised, as to whether or not they're actually really going for the gold in this. You have Colorado having some ethical issues with their co-chair of the party presiding over that presidential race, who is also Hawkins' campaign manager. You have this ridiculous issue going on with Georgia, where the Georgia Green Party is espousing anti-trans hate and driving people away. All of these things being done in the context of quote unquote decentralization, which really is amounting to disorganization amongst the parties, and is laying bare the atrophy in the national party and its inability to make clear its green values to state parties and tell them you can't run away with the green banner if you don't really espouse the values of the party. And so we see on multiple fronts the party being torn apart. And most of those fronts at present happen to be related to the Hawkins campaign.
I mean, so in 2016, when I was investigating party corruption, at a certain point, I was not hearing the whole incompetence thing, right? I'm like, why is it everybody who is incompetent, quote unquote, making mistakes, not being nefarious, so it's just pure incompetence? Why is it that all of them are connected directly to Hillary Clinton? All of them, financially or through title. Like, that's not a coincidence at a certain point. And at the bare minimum, right? When you're talking about Howie, Andrea's a different person. Oh, well, Kevin's a different person. Oh, well, this is a different person. But who's going to be held accountable? Who would we hold accountable in the instance that this was a Democrat frontrunner? We would hold the Democrat candidate itself accountable.
It's the candidate. The buck stops with the candidate, always. And Howie knows very well what is going on. He's being told by people who find what's going on completely reprehensible. The fact that Andrea and Zeese and other people have been the face of it doesn't change the fact that the responsibility is the candidate, whether he or she is directly connecting with people in these nefarious ways. So they know what's going on. They know exactly what they're doing. And it's really unfortunate. The party is, it stands to lose so much through the divisiveness that's taking place. And the fact that National really isn't doing enough or really doing anything to combat these multiple fronts of divisiveness is really damaging to the party. It's been damaging already, going to be damaging in 2020, and will be damaging beyond 2020. This is a clear and serious threat to the party, its values, and its agenda in this race and beyond.
So one of the issues going into the 2020 general election is obviously going to be what's happened yesterday. Really, it's already about, there's another protest scheduled today, with the killing of Ahmaud Arbery and George Floyd. And I mean, the list really does go on. And I do want to say that that's just a list of people we know about, that's police departments corrupt statistics all the time. So I know this is going to be a discussion that's had. There's no way that it's not. And yet, as I've been looking at leaders, around the country, leaders who are running for primaries in Congress and things like that, I look to see how much they've spoken about this. I don't expect all of them to get it right per se 100%, but hey, prove to me and show me this is a very important issue to you and you're trying to understand it. Now, on Howie's side, Howie has not really shown any interest. He's been talking about his victories. Some of them literally handed to him, but this seemingly has been put on the back burner as long as he wins. I mean, he just talked about his Florida victory on his Twitter account, and like literally yesterday, we just had a car explode right in front of the police department on right below a bridge, and So I just don't see that type of interest. And if I'm supposed to be inspired as a black voter, who's and this issue is very important to me and close to me, how are other black black and non-white voters and other marginalized people going to respond to you not giving a damn? I don't know how to say it. So, and I also have been peeping your tweets. I know you don't tweet much, but you made it very clear where your stances are regarding these issues over the last couple of days. And so, what do you believe? How do you feel about this idea that somehow another old white guy whose campaign is effectively being ran by old white elite is now basically he's doing worse than not talking about, like the DNC is talking about it in a way that kind of co-ops the message. He's just almost ignoring it. How do you feel like that's going to translate for black support for third parties going forward?
You know, I think when it really comes down to it, this issue really demands all hands on deck, and it's a time to show and prove. You know, our campaign has been very vocal from the outset before this particular incident. And I want to say this particular incident because this is really for 400 plus years, black bodies have been lynched, murdered, raped. You know, this is not news. It is tragic and horrific every time it happens, but it shouldn't be news. And that's why our campaign has had a sharp focus on this with our People of Color Bill of Rights, addressing the gap between the rights we say we have on the books and the real world experience of people of color. And that includes addressing the problems with our justice system, addressing the police brutality, the genocide on our streets. And we saw this with George Floyd. We have seen this with Eric Garner. You know, it keeps happening because, and we fundamentally believe this, reform is not enough. You often get this from neoliberals. We got to reform, we got to tweak here, we got to fix here, we got to do that. No, policing started out as a tool of genocide in this country. That's its origins. And so you have to tear down all of that, you know, foundation and all, and rebuild anew, and rebuild a structure where you have community control of policing, where law enforcement is intended to solve problems rather than create them, which is what we see very often, especially with communities of color, and where we end the militarization of the police. We talk about war and peace as a party, as leftists, but we have to talk about issues of war and peace on the home front, because there is a war against people of color on the part of a militarized colonial police. Okay, that's where the tactics come from colonialism. So we have to demilitarize the police and deal with, we mentioned Israel-Palestine earlier, the fact that they are using tactics that are being used for genocide elsewhere in the world. You know, police forces are being trained by Israeli police to engage in the same kind of genocidal tactics. So that is the country that we live in. We have to end all of that. Every single piece of that has to be a part of the agenda moving forward. And of course, we need to deal with the justice system that isn't holding people accountable. You know, you had this incident with George Floyd, but you also had this incident with a Karen in Central Park who tried to engage in murder by cop just because she was called on for not having her dog on a leash. Disgusting. Yep. She knew what was going to happen when she got on that phone and called the police and said, "There's a black man threatening me."
Because she said, "I'm going to call the police and tell them there's a black man threatening me and my dog," and then just became hysterical the moment she got on the phone. She was trying to get him killed. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, she's trying to get him killed, and there need to be clear charges on the books to deal with murder by cop as it is murder by cop, as the hate crime that it is. And there needs to be clear charges on the books to deal with people who do what that woman did in Central Park, to hold people accountable. So we need to revamp the legal framework, and we need to improve our justice system to ensure that there's genuine access to justice, because we have a system that is broken fundamentally. We have public defenders with overcrowded dockets dealing with black youths and saying to them, "You know what, just plead guilty. I know you say you're innocent, but I've only had 30 seconds to look at this case. Plead guilty, they'll give you 20 years. It's better than getting life." That's the larger landscape of the injustice system that we have in our country. And all these things are connected. They're all connected. And they are spokes off of the wheel of what? The democratic deficit in this country, which is inherently abusively capitalist and inherently racist. And so you mentioned earlier the touting of wins on the part of a candidate. What does that amount to if you aren't moving forward the agenda? And what does it amount to if your campaign is in effect participating in the Democratic deficit that affects us all negatively and people of color more than anyone else. You got campaigns happening in this Green primary race where the local primary or convention, they're not even letting people know about it. Kansas didn't let anyone know that they had one. It wasn't on their website, wasn't on Twitter. They announced it after the Hawkins campaign won unanimously. So how can you talk about moving forward on these issues which are connected to the Democratic deficit and people being shut out of having voice and choice and say, while you're participating in people being shut out of having voice and choice and say? I'm the only candidate who's been an elected official in this race. And from that, I know firsthand what happens when communities are shut out and don't have a Democratic voice, because it happened in the school district in Youngstown, Ohio, where predominantly Black students and parents were not given a voice and choice over their future. So don't just talk the talk, whoever you are, Mr. Candidate, Ms. Candidate, don't just talk the talk. You need to walk the walk.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, he should be, in my humble opinion, sending out press requests to every single independent journalist in hell, any mainstream journalist that will accept it. If he considers himself the front runner and he looks like he's going to be the candidate, and if you actually want to beat the two, I mean, once again, literal segregationists and the open racists, then why not use this moment to your advantage? Hell, like I said, even strategically use it to your advantage. But you can't even disingenuously be on our side. And what's even more interesting about this is I'm not naive. I know for a fact that it's Andrea who generally runs Howie Hawkins' account. Andrea has expressed to me and multiple people that everyone dislikes her and has spread rumors about her because she's a woman of color, and everybody, including people of color, are racist and sexist, even though those people are also women and people of color. So I just find it interesting that I know you run his account. This should be an issue, that everything that's going on should be a major issue of concern for somebody like yourself. And yet, even when you have control over an account that really is supposed to be speaking for an entire group or in trying to win over people from that group, you have basically not cared. You've shown no real, genuine concern. You have made no calls to action. And I'm saying this as a journalist, because I feel like I have the responsibility to say it, because it's Howie's account, but it says even more that the woman of color who's accused everybody else of being racist and not wanting to uplift her has shown zero concern when Black men are shot dead in the street. People are out rioting because of all this political, social, and economic angst, and you have nothing to say about it, really. Like, they've retweeted a couple of things, and that's been about it. That says a lot to me, and you can't go forward as the leader of the party with that type of behavior.
Look, skin folk ain't always kinfolk. You know who else is from Youngstown, Ohio? Omarosa. We definitely ain't political kinfolk. So, look, just because you belong to the same particular group that actually goes through a similar set of circumstances doesn't mean you come to the same political conclusions, unfortunately. And some people come to some rather unfortunate political conclusions. And some people become water carriers, water bearers for privilege. And if that's your choice, boo, if that's the way that you want to roll, you do you, but I'm gonna still call you out at every turn. And don't you dare try to come forward and act like you're a victim when you are a water carrier for privilege, and it's gaining you whatever it's gaining you. I don't know if it's getting you cash or prizes, or just getting you some crumbs of privilege, because sometimes this privilege system decides that they throw some crumbs your way, and some people are satisfied with that. I never have been. It's not my style, but that works for some people. But don't you dare come out and play the victim, especially when you're out attacking people and doxing people and doing all these nasty tactics on behalf of the system.
She was a co-chair of the Green Party and the co-chair people. I don't know if y'all noticed, but there's not been for any party, like for any of the major parties, and I would consider, even though it's obviously smaller, I still consider the Green Party a major party, because generally that's where people leftists look to next, just like the conservatives look to the Libertarian Party next. There's no major party, not a single time, that has had a person of color as a chair and they were not corrupt. That is just not, it has never happened. It's literally not, it's always a white person who's neoconservative or neoliberal, or they put someone like Donna Brazile in, where she admitted, even with her corruption on the Tim Black show, this was about 3 years ago, that you have to play ball to get in that position, and the moment you don't play ball as a person of color, you're gone. She admitted it, and she's one of them. So that's how I feel about that.
Well, in the Green Party, we have had we have numerous cases of people of color who have been co-chairs of the party, and one of them is my running mate, Darlene Elias, and she
Awesome.
doesn't play.
I looked up Darlene.
Yeah, she will call out oppression, and she has consistently. She has been a social justice activist. She's been a housing activist, a women's rights activist, an activist for Latinx rights, and she is very vocal about calling out oppression. But once again, back to my earlier statement, skinfolk ain't always kinfolk, and some people really just decide to get on board with an agenda that, as I mentioned earlier, gets them some semblance of privilege, and it's really unfortunate. You talked about this idea that some people don't particularly like Andrea. I can't speak so much to that. That's really anecdotal. But look at the things coming out of her in that campaign. That's what she said?
Yeah, that's what she said. People don't like her because she's a woman of color. That's what she told. Everybody.
Well, stop doxing people. Stop attacking. Stop engaging in character assassinations. Stop getting out there and putting forward the most divisive picture going into 2020 and ripping the part. People don't like you ripping apart the things that they've invested decades of work in. People tend not to like that.
So before we go, I want to let you know about this super chat from H. Rivera. He said, thanks for having Dario on. He's a good candidate. So you got a lot of love in the chats. You've been definitely getting a lot of love, on social media, and a lot of Green Party people I met in person know you and they love you. So it's a good sign going forward, no matter what happens. And the Green Party itself, listen, y'all. Once again, I'm speaking to somebody who I used to be a surrogate for Jill Stein, introduced her at her Detroit rally, where there was so much energy in the room. I couldn't believe it. There's 600 to 700 people there. It was insane. The Green Party had a lot of success over the last 2 or 3 years. And I helped in every way I could to try and make them successful. But with that being said, like Dario just mentioned, nobody wants to see years of time invested result in this. Nobody. Unless you are somehow going to benefit from this, regardless of the outcome. And that's what it seems like. Some people are invested in their personal agenda, their personal benefits, usually financial in nature, and they don't really care about how the rest of the country will be affected by their negativity, their vitriol, their divisiveness, and their lack of effort to actually win over independent voters. So, Dario, thank you for coming on. I greatly appreciate it. Let everybody know where they can find you at.
Absolutely. You can find us at dariohunter.com, where you can join our email list. You can sign up to volunteer. And we wish the money was not a part of politics, but unfortunately for the time being it is. So you should also donate on our website. Every little bit helps in our fight for justice for the earth and all its people. So thank you once again for having me on the show.
No problem. And for everybody else, thank you all so much for tuning into this live stream interview on Mikasa Sukasa. And always remember, more than anything else, find your balance. Peace. If you like that segment of Mikasa Sukasa, don't forget to like the video and smash that subscribe button. Want access to members only live streams, behind the scenes footage, and other premium content? Well, you can endorse us on Rockman Premium, become a patron through Patreon, or you can sign up for the MCSC Premium membership through YouTube. All the links are in the description below. But hey, more than anything else, always remember,
find your balance.
Find your balance.
Find your balance.
Find your balance. Find your balance.
Find your balance. Find your balance.
Always remember, more than anything else, find your balance.
peace.